Today we're talking about laser cutters and to see if you should get one for yourself. I was fortunate enough to learn about laser cutting on a very nice, very expensive machine that was definitely not ours, and I did a ton of laser cutting on that one. And I was scrolling through Facebook Market the other day and I found a knockoff of a knockoff of a knockoff of a really crappy laser for really dirt cheap. I spent a total of 150 bucks on it. It's about the cheapest you could ever get a laser cutter for, unless it's one of those really tiny ones. The one I got was a Nasum A5 Pro, which you have probably never heard of. I definitely had not heard of it before I bought it. I did pretty bare minimum research before I picked this thing up, bought it, and plugged it in and just to see how it goes. And I've been playing around with it a lot just to see what the differences are between the really nice machine that I learned on versus this machine that is a lot more affordable, but it comes at a cost. So if you can get a laser for 150 bucks, I kind of don't not recommend it. We're gonna go through a whole bunch of pros and cons of this laser that I bought to see if you would want a really crappy laser like the one I have, slightly better, or a really nice one. And we're gonna go through that really quick, so buckle up. So here it is in all its glory. It's a really simple system with two bottom rails and a top rail that moves in the X and Y direction. It really is just a rebranded version of the AtomStack A5, and it has all the bare necessities and nothing much more. Starting off with the cons of this little guy, everything, and I mean everything, is manually adjusted, from the belt tensioning to the X, Y, and Z axes. That's pretty standard for these rail style cutters, but it can get quite annoying. Here I am adjusting the Z axis that you have to manually loosen and tighten each time to focus the laser on your material, and just look at that precision. I don't see anything wrong with this at all. It really gets annoying after a while, but what's more annoying is that we don't even get an on-off switch. In order to turn off the machine, you have to unplug it. Not ideal and kind of a safety issue. Next, Nasum markets this by saying you don't need laser safety glasses when operating. The gaps in this red plexi material tell me differently though. It did come with safety glasses though, and it's a good thing it did, because I don't trust this at all to keep lasers out of my eyes, especially when you're engraving metal or acrylic or other reflective materials. Oh, it looks like it's nap time for our little backyard buddy. What a cutie. Since this laser is a much lower wattage than most, it does take forever, especially on etches. But how does it cut? There's good news and bad news. If you bought one of these thinking you'd be able to cut through 1/4 inch MDF, you've got a problem. I got it to go through 1/8 inch plywood with 3 passes before and quite a bit of scorching, but it can get through a lot for as cheap as it is. Now acrylic on the other hand is a problem apparently. Other lasers I've used have no problem cutting through acrylic, but cheaper lasers like this one tend to etch on the backside so that your image is actually reversed. And just forget about cutting it. It just does not work. Yes, it was focused correctly. Yes, I tried the black cardstock and dish soap trick. If it's that much effort to cut acrylic, then it's just not worth bothering trying to cut acrylic in my opinion. I ran a dozen or so tests just to get it to etch or cut properly with no success at all. So if you have any suggestion, I'm all ears, but I think that acrylic, just for now, is not a cuttable material with this laser. I also tried acrylic with a paper backer, the paper cut, but definitely not the acrylic. Also, just be wary of what you are cutting. Plexi is not the same as acrylic. Plexi is toxic and burning it will not be good. I want to max out what this machine can do, so I taped together 4 sheets of 1/8 inch ply to see if I can get it to cut through just more than one layer. I really have my doubts. On the darkest square, I ran 7 passes at its slowest speed before it started turning into charcoal and kind of catching on fire a little bit, so I stopped. And it didn't make it through that entirely still. But that's really what we paid for. So I'm starting a library of different material samples. There's definitely some burning, but they're really not too bad. You can definitely notice the accuracy issue here on the straight etch lines or on the circles where there's just a little bit of jiggliness happening. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything I can do to fix that issue. The letter etching looks really good and really nice and clean and legible. The other thing I'm noticing is that in the X direction, the etch line is actually a little bit thicker than the Y-axis. Smarter people than I have told me that that's because the shape of a laser is actually not a perfect circle or a square. It's actually a rectangle, and nice lasers have optical corrective dongles that counteract that. Cheaper lasers don't. Well, so far all I've done is complain, and rightfully so. There's a lot of stuff that could be better on this laser. But there are definitely some redeemable factors too. First of all, it is extremely portable. All you need is the laptop and the laser, and you can kind of take it wherever you want to, which is really nice. It's also pretty durable. I'm gonna use that word a little bit lightly because you can definitely get it out of square, which is not fun. But from what I've seen so far, it can take a little bit of rough housing before it needs actual adjustment. It's really not bad on burn marks either. I expected it to be a lot worse, especially on some of the thicker stuff like the 16th inch wood. Really, we aren't seeing much more burn than we would on a really nice machine. Although Air Assist would help dramatically to make that better. And again, for the price, I really can't complain. Well, I can. Eva and I are complete nerds sometimes, and we love complex board games. If you know anything about complex board games, it's that they have a lot of pieces. This particular one had no real box organization, so I set out to make my own. Shout out to the Broken Token on Etsy for the laser cut file. The file was perfect, and I highly recommend checking them out. This was all 1/8 inch birch ply, so a pretty hard material to cut cleanly, but our laser seemed to do a pretty good job. But with the amount of time it took our laser to cut through all this wood, it would have been a lot easier if we had just bought the Broken Tokens product instead of buying their file to make our own product. And here's a really cool box that I made for Caliente Art Glass Studio, fully fitted out with a capacitive touch sensor and a custom 3D printed LED holder to light up this beautiful piece of glass. So would I use this laser if I had a small business that was making laser cut prints and running very, very frequently? Absolutely not. But for general hobby stuff and just like, hey, let's throw it in the laser and see what happens and see if we can get something to look really good for those times when you need a little engraving or just a little cut, like a specific cut, it works great. And in order to own a laser cutter, you really don't have to go out and buy one of those $5,000 machines to have something that works really decently well and for kind of cheap.